Actually, architectural historian, and in this video let's explore the subject of the comfort of a peasant house in what is now Romania. This is a very diverse subject, and it has a lot to do with the region which we are studying, examining, like the former Principality of Wallachia, Moldavia, or Transylvania. Also, it has a lot to do with the wealth of that peasant family. Obviously, the wealthier one having more comfortable houses than the less wealthier one. But the wealth of a peasant in this region of Northern Balkans depends very much of their social status, of their legal standing within the society. This was a society which had serfdom among peasants in the principalities from the south of the Carpathians and east of the Carpathian, Moldavia and Wallachia, the same in Transylvania, but also they had communities, especially in the highlands, of free peasants, the peasants who had their own property. And obviously here is a difference between the lowland peasants, which were usually the serfs one, subject to the big landowners and the local voivoda or local prince, and the free ones who had to pay certain taxes, and obviously they were much wealthier than the other one. So we are reducing our area of investigation in order to be clearer to the Romanian peasant communities of Moldavia and Wallachia, especially of Wallachia is the case in study, because that's why I have the illustrative examples for them, but it goes very well for Moldavia too. We accept Transylvania because there is an entirely different dynamics. They're having multiple ethnic groups with different social status positions. Usually Romanians were at the bottom of this social organization, just above the gypsies, but in Moldavia and Wallachia they were a social class within the society, at the bottom of course, but not in such a bad situation like in Transylvania. So we are on Wallachia. We are looking at the peasant houses and their comfort in the lowland compared with the wealthier one, which, as I said, because of their free peasant status, from the highlands. Let's see some examples, and I prepared for you some interesting postcards from my collection of postcards, all postcards. They are here, and we have a house, first one to examine, from the Bergan lowlands. Is this one. You can see it's an extremely poor house. The postcard is dated in 1904, was sent in 1904. I will show to you the back of the postcard later on, but let's locate the Bergan steppe or prairie, which I have here on the map. So this is a Google Earth for Romania. You can see the Carpathians, who are in the middle of the country, and then plains to the east is the former Moldavia, which now is part of Romania and an independent country, Republic of Moldova, and here in the south, Wallachia. Wallachia, as I said, is our case in studies now. And Transylvania is over here, a much more complex situation. We'll be looking at examples from here. This is a plain area. It's a flat area with just a few rivers, not many woodlands. It's based in some bits and pieces of it is even treeless, like in the Russian steppe, typical of the steppes around the Black Sea area. And here are the highlands, the Subcarpathian hills, and here is the Alpine mountains, the Carpathians proper. in this area the peasants were wealthier because in these areas we have the free peasant communities. And in the lowlands, where we have the feudal social organization up until the early modern times, like 1880s or around about the Great War, when there were the first peasant reforms giving property to the peasants, these areas were serf villages. Just a few of them, a handful of them, were free. So it's a stark difference between lowland and highland. Let's go back to our example over here. This one is from lowland, dated 1904. It's an undivided postcard. You'll see the back of it. Was sent somewhere to England, Clapham, to junior masonry girls school, and here you have good eyes. You can see the sending date, 7th of June 1904. The postcard itself was a photograph made probably by the postcard dealers and printed somewhere in Dresden. At that time, that was the place where the Romanian postcard dealers and print dealers were sending their negatives in order to produce these postcards. Later on, they will produce them in-house in Bucharest itself. It's said a house in the countryside, and you can see how poor this family is. It's basically having a cabin only, and here is quite a numerous family. The father of the family, the wife, daughter, and son over here. And many of them were even more numerous than that. It's basically just one room, and here a small veranda. And how they live, they have a chicken over here. These are bunches of onions and garlic, some more over here, a small vegetable patch over here, and they were indentured peasants, serfs to the big landowners. The image here being from 1904 is after the first big peasant reform, which has happened in the 1880s for peasants who fought in the independence war against the Ottoman Empire. They were given properties, but obviously large part of these peasants were still under landowner subjects, and they were in this extremely poor situation. Look even at the roof. It's made from maize tulpins, dried maize tulpins over here. So dirt poor, 1904 Europe, something like in the remote parts of Ireland. Let's go even further. So it's me there. Get out from this one. And this one too. Go here. And the same house in another postcard, which was published, which was sent somewhere in the 1908, I think. We'll have a look here at the post. Is basically the same family, probably from the same series of negatives, but printed much later and in Bucharest this time. It's now the father of the family over here, and this is probably the grandmother. You can see, if you have good eyes, that she's shoeless, and he's got this kind of poor skin shoes fixed with strings on the legs, typical of entire Eastern Europe, especially to the Slavic communities. Look how they keep their winter coats. This is their cupboard in a way. Here's a small cow on the side, and that is probably the stable for the cow. What they have is just the most basic kind of tools. Here is a hoe in his hands, and then small trolley over here made from wood, and here a basket, and here probably potatoes or some other kind of vegetables put together. But look at the house. It's made from mud, bricks, basic sticks of wood, just a small window without glass pane. Look at the roof made from maize tulpins, dried maize tulpins. It's absolutely unbelievable, and this is 20th century. A so-called modern European state, Romania. Let's continue investigating this postcard. This one is the back of the postcard. You can see that it's undivided. It's divided now, comparing with the other one, which was undivided. And over here, you can see the date, 1908, 29th of July, 1908. And this one was sent somewhere in Bordeaux, in France, to France. Let's continue and see a similar house from the plains. This one is a photograph made before the Great War, which are circulating the postcard dealers in Bucharest and other towns of Romania, which was later on used by the occupation authorities, German occupation authorities, who controlled all the publishing houses in Romania during the occupation, 1916, 1918, on the occupied Romania. And you can see that they have words, the titles in Romanian and in German for the use of the occupation troops. These postcards were used even in the 1920s because they were in stock, and they were sold even in the 1920s, as we can see with the back of this postcard, which is shows you that aspect. This one, 1923, again sent somewhere to France. So let's have a look at it. The same aspect of the house, extremely poor. You have the same type of roof, which is the tulpins of the maize plant. Here probably the same kind of stuff, covered again with some straw, wheat straw. And you can see peasants, shoeless peasants. Here are probably watermelons from the local crop. This one is carrying, this lady carrying water probably. And the general poverty, and you can imagine the comfort of these houses. One-room houses, probably a small kitchen in a corner, and a quite large family living in this kind of houses. Now, obviously, the Romanian government wasn't so keen to show these realities. As I mentioned before, these postcards were initially published in the West and peddled by the dealers in Bucharest, or sold as a kind of curiosities for foreigners or for collectors. There were also in the same time circulating idealized images of the peasants, like this one, which is drawing on a postcard. You see, this is a happy family, quite wealthy. Look at the house, it's much larger, much better roof made from straw or thatch from the local lakes. You can see nice peasants with shoes in their having shoes and nice clothes. Here is the peasant lady, very good clothes. This one's nice looking, trimmed peasant. This one even thinks about probably his wealth. And look, they have all of this oxen, geese, prosperity. But this is government propaganda, and again it's a postcard sent in 1905, as you can see here, somewhere I think somewhere in it's from Brăila, southeast Romania, and it's sent to Texas. This is an undivided postcard, Austin, Texas, USA. Fascinating in a way. So government propaganda, I would say, and also people, Romanians keen to show a nicer bucolic aspect of their environment, or the comfort of the majority of the population, the peasants. Another nice example of a wealthy peasant house is this one, which is not a real house. What you see over here is a house from the Great Royal Exhibition, or a sort of local universal exhibition of 1906, which was in Bucharest, celebrating 40 years of glorious rule of King Carol I, the one who brought the independence of the country, and also the event of the Roman conquest 1800 years before 1906. And this is a model house, what you see here. These peasants were brought from countryside. They have nice clean clothes, although some of them are shoeless, but even in town people were shoeless at that time. Look at the house, quite a large one. They have bathroom, they have toilet. It's a model house for those times. So it's an idealized house put in a postcard, and again to make a kind of propaganda, government propaganda, and also to not make the local shameful of their peasant class, 80% of the population, as I said. Let's compare these lowland houses, which I shown it to you so far, the real examples like this one, and the idealized one like this one from the lowlands, with the ones from the uplands, from the highlands, let's put it that way, from the Subcarpathian. And this is one nice, interesting example. A much better house. It's from a village museum in Curtișoara, Gorj County, which is in southwestern Romania. Let's go back to the map. It's somewhere around here in the highlands. And again, you can see that those people are in a different league. The house has a stone base. It has a nice solid wooden structure. It's not made from mud. It has a proper roof made from wooden shingle. And amazingly enough, this is a house which was used up until mid 20th century, before it became a museum piece, which was built in the late 18th century. So even from the late 18th century, because of this social status of being a free peasant, a freeholder, you were able to have a much better house. It had two rooms. This one is the kitchen, and this one over here is the bedroom, and also the loom was here for the winter days when the woman of the house was weaving the homespun clothes and all of the other like rags, other peasant artifacts. Here you can see a beehive, for example. It's a courtyard. On the side, it's not in the photograph, they had stables for probably a horse, and a pigsty, a coop for chickens. So a proper peasant house with its comfort. Even the window is quite large enough. As I said, it's from the 18th century and used up until mid 20th century. You notice that it doesn't have a chimney stack. Why is that? Because here in the kitchen, the smoke was going straight into this loft when they were preparing the food, or in the winter times, which was quite good because the smoke was keeping warm the house, was melting the snow, and also keeping the parasites, wood parasites, away. A very practical solution. Not very comfortable if you live there, but much more comfortable than and healthier than in the lowlands. Let's see another house from the same museum. This one, again from a peasant house from the Gorj County, from the highlands, from the Subcarpathian hills. It has the living quarters upstairs with a nice veranda. Again, 2 rooms, kitchen and bedroom, family bedroom. And the ground floor is the place for animals, the stables for animals, and also the grain warehouse, if I can call it that way. Potatoes and everything goes stored here in this unit, in the ground floor unit. So an excellent setup and comfortable even for today, I would say. For those of you interested in the small house movement, this is the way to build your house, an extremely comfortable house. Again, from the highlands of the Subcarpathians, from the free peasant community. So you can see the huge difference in status between the two communities. Let's see another one from the same county in southwestern Romania. It's a priest house. It's even better appointed with the proper stairs, veranda. It has 2 rooms with the kitchen, and again here a veranda in the area for the animal stables and the place where they were storing potatoes and grains. A much more interesting setup, a much more comfortable. You can see also the building technique here is all of these bits and pieces of wood intercalated with mud brick and then plaster above, as you see over here. It's not plastered over here, with much more windows. A big one over here with glass panes, and the smaller ones which were open just in the summertime over here, which were covered with wooden planks in the winter times. So this was a priest house, late 19th century, early 20th century, southwestern Romania. So a huge difference between the comfort of the basically the same communities, the same faith, the same culture, but living in 2 regions which in a way conditions their social status. In the lowland we have the peasants who are for centuries subjects to the landlords as serfs. In the uplands we have the free peasant communities who having their own property, and they had just to pay taxes or from time to time to put some work for the state or the agricultural lands of the state or the big local landowners, but not in the same way like in the lowlands. Anyway, fast forward 20th century, we have the agricultural reforms on the big landlord estates are finished, especially after the Great War, when the state gave property land to the peasants. And even in the lowlands we have peasants who are quite big proprietors of land now. The old estates were divided, the big estates of the old landowners were left up to 50 hectares, not more than that. So you can imagine a large amount of land distributed to this large population which sacrificed itself in the Great War, so it was recompensated like this. Here we have a house which was built after the Second World War. Again mud brick, but much larger. A few rooms over here. It's central kitchen, Ottoman type. As you can see here, chimney stack. Smaller rooms on the side for the older members of the families. And here the stable for animals. And also you have the grain deposits and all of other things over here. You can see here a plow, for example. Much more wealthier. It's just before the cooperativization of agriculture by the communists, when this land was taken away from peasants. So it was probably at their wealthiest stage for the lowland peasants. I know this situation quite well in my own experience, life experience, because this is my grandparents' house from my father's side in my village. The photograph is made here when the house was empty. They died a few years after they died, so the house was left like this, not having occupants. So can you see it's not well looked after, and understandable, so it's no one there to live. but it gives you a very good idea about the increasing wealth status of these peasants. After just one generation ago, they were dirt poor, basically living in cabins in the land and at the mercy of the landowners. So I hope that you found interesting this presentation, and it gives you a better idea about the evolution of architecture in this part of Europe. How difficult it is to speak about a proper architecture when you have a geopolitical area which is a periphery of multiple empires, and also the local population subject to big landowners, and the proper architecture is only in towns, and that is not a large scale one because of this geopolitical situation. But nevertheless, it's interesting to see the dynamics of it. It has its own kind of particularities and gives us clue about even the more sophisticated societies of the Central and Western Europe, how they developed in the initial stages, the sort of cultural and social anthropology we have over here. Thank you, and we'll see each other very soon. Bye bye.